done it again. Best player on the planet. You can't defend it.
Messi read his mind with Pedro and 4 defenders.
On the ridiculous angle through the legs of Thibaut Courtois.
Lionel Messi was supposed to be finished a long time ago. Rewind to 2018. Argentina crash out of the World Cup in Russia, humiliated, disorganized, a golden generation collapsing in on itself. Messi is 31 years old, and pundits across the world are writing the same headline. This was his last World Cup. His body is slowing down. His national team career is falling apart around him. The story, everyone assumed, was over. 4 years later, at 35, Messi lifted the World Cup in Qatar. 4 years after that, at 39, he walked out for a World Cup final again. This time in the United States, at the 2026 tournament, falling just short against Spain. Twice now the world declared Lionel Messi finished. Twice, he proved everyone wrong. So here's the question nobody wants to say out loud, because it sounds too outrageous, too impossible, too far-fetched. Could Lionel Messi actually play at the 2030 World Cup? At 43 years old? In a tournament being hosted across Spain, Portugal, and Morocco? It sounds like fantasy. But when you actually break down the pieces, the coach, the tactical system, the psychology, the physical data, the club situation, the dressing room culture, even the commercial machinery around the sport, a different picture starts to form. Not a guarantee, not a certainty, but a case. A real, concrete, evidence-based case for why the door to a 7th World Cup has never actually closed. In this video, we're going to break down every single reason, one by one, more thoroughly than anyone else has. By the end, you might not be certain Messi will play in 2030, but you'll understand exactly why it's not the fantasy it sounds like. If there is one person holding the key to Messi's future with Argentina, it isn't Messi himself. It's Lionel Scaloni. When Scaloni took over the national team job, he inherited a squad in crisis and a superstar who, by his own admission, couldn't do what he used to do physically. Most coaches, faced with an aging genius who can no longer press for 90 minutes or sprint the length of the pitch, make a simple calculation: use him less or leave him out entirely. Scaloni did the opposite. He restructured the entire team around one guiding principle: protect Messi's legs and let his mind do the rest of the work. Look at how Argentina's midfield actually functions. Rodrigo de Paul, Enzo Fernandez, and Alexis Mac Allister aren't just talented players slotted into a lineup. They are, functionally, Messi's insurance policy. They cover the defensive ground he no longer covers. They win the ball back in midfield, break up opposition attacks, close down space, and track back when Argentina lose possession. And when they finally win the ball, their first instinct isn't to build an elaborate passing sequence. It's to find Messi's feet as quickly as possible and let him take it from there. This isn't accidental, it's designed. Scaloni has built a machine whose entire purpose is to deliver the ball to Messi in dangerous positions while asking almost nothing of him defensively. It's the closest thing football has to giving a genius a private security detail made of world-class athletes. Messi himself has acknowledged this openly. Speaking after Argentina's win over Egypt during the 2026 World Cup, he made a point of crediting the players around him, saying that he's only able to stay on the pitch because of what his teammates sacrifice on his behalf, because they understand he's covering less distance than he used to, and they're the ones making up for it. That's a remarkable thing for a player of Messi's stature to say publicly. It tells you the system isn't some secret tactical trick hidden from the players. Everyone inside that dressing room knows exactly what's happening, and everyone has bought into it completely. But Scaloni's influence goes beyond formations and pressing triggers. He changed the emotional architecture of the entire national team. For more than a decade before Scaloni arrived, Argentina's failures were absorbed almost entirely by one man. Every penalty miss, every final lost, every disappointing tournament, the blame landed on Messi's shoulders, fair or not. That weight followed him constantly, year after year, tournament after tournament. Scaloni ended that cycle. Under his management, responsibility for results is shared across the entire squad. Young players don't walk into camp expecting Messi to rescue them. They walk in looking for ways to protect him instead. Part of that shift is cultural. Pablo Aimar, The player Messi idolized as a kid growing up in Rosario now works alongside Scaloni on the Argentina coaching staff. Having his childhood hero as a mentor figure inside the camp has turned the national team setup into something Messi has described, in various forms over the years, as the happiest environment he's experienced in an Argentina shirt. That matters more than people realize. Athletes don't just retire because their bodies fail. They retire because the environment stops being worth the effort. Scaloni has made sure that's never a reason for Messi to walk away. And critically, Scaloni has never treated Messi's international retirement as something on a clock. Asked directly whether Messi could still be part of Argentina's plans heading into the 2030 World Cup, Scaloni's answer wasn't hedged or cautious. He made clear that the decision belongs entirely to Messi, and that he'll keep playing for as long as he wants to. As long as Scaloni remains in charge of the national team, that door stays open. No artificial deadline, no forced retirement plan. Just an open invitation for as long as Messi's body and motivation allow. That's reason one. A coach who didn't just adapt his tactics to an aging superstar, he built an entire ecosystem designed to keep that superstar playing at the highest level for as long as humanly possible. Most footballers' careers are dictated by one brutal, unavoidable truth. The body eventually stops cooperating. Pace fades first. Acceleration goes next. Recovery times get longer. Explosiveness, the ability to beat a defender in a single burst, disappears gradually and then all at once. For the overwhelming majority of players, decline is a physical inevitability, and once it starts, there's no reversing it. Messi has never really played that kind of game. Go back and look at the tracking data from the 2026 World Cup. FIFA's own performance metrics showed that roughly 64% of Messi's total on-pitch movement came at walking pace. He averaged just 88 kilometers of distance covered per match, the lowest of any outfield player at the entire tournament. Teenagers were outrunning him. Fringe squad players who barely touched the ball were covering more ground than the player considered by many to be the greatest of all time. And yet, by the metrics that actually matter, nobody produced more. Messi finished that tournament among the tournament leaders in goals, in assists, in chances created, in successful dribbles completed. On paper, that shouldn't be possible. A player covering the least distance on the pitch shouldn't also be among the most productive. But that apparent contradiction is exactly what makes Messi's game so unusual and so resistant to the normal rules of aging. Here's what's actually happening. When Messi appears to be walking, he isn't resting. He's working, just not in a way that shows up on a distance tracker. He's scanning the pitch. He's clocking where defenders are positioning themselves, measuring the exact distances between opposition lines, identifying which defender is a half step slow to react, which fullback is ball watching instead of tracking his run. By the time the ball actually reaches his feet, the decision has usually already been made in his head seconds earlier. The pass, the turn, the shot, the disguised through ball, all of it calculated before most players on the pitch have even recognized the opportunity existed. This is why people who've studied his game closely describe him as something closer to an attacking midfielder wearing a forward's number. Even in matches where he doesn't score, he can completely reshape the outcome purely through passing and decision-making. A single perfectly weighted ball from the middle of the pitch can unlock an entire defensive structure and flip the momentum of a game in an instant. That kind of impact doesn't require sprinting. It requires vision, timing, and years of accumulated football intelligence, none of which erodes with age the way physical speed does. That's the core of reason two. Messi's greatest asset was never his legs. It was always his brain. And unlike pace, which fades on a predictable physical timeline, football intelligence doesn't decline with age. In many cases, it sharpens. Which is exactly why the idea of Messi still playing meaningful minutes at 43 isn't as absurd as it first sounds. He won't need to outrun a 25-year-old right back. He'll simply need to be 2 steps ahead of him mentally, the same way he's been doing for the better part of 2 decades. Physical readiness is only half the equation. The other half is psychological. And Messi's history shows just how heavily that side of the equation weighs on his decision-making. Rewind to 2016. Messi is 29 years old, arguably right in the heart of his athletic prime. And yet, after Argentina lose yet another major final, their 3rd consecutive defeat on the biggest stage, Messi announces his retirement from international football. Not because his body had betrayed him, not because his ability had diminished in any measurable way. He walked away because the emotional toll had become unbearable. 15 years of carrying the weight of an entire nation's expectations, 3 heartbreaking final losses in a row. It broke something, at least temporarily. Then came 2021, and the Copa America, and a night at the Maracana that changed everything. Argentina beat Brazil. Messi collapsed to the turf in tears. In that single moment, over a decade of accumulated pressure lifted off his shoulders, and the transformation that followed wasn't gradual, it was almost immediate. A World Cup title in 2022, another Copa America in 2024, and then, at 39 years old, a performance at the 2026 World Cup that defied every normal expectation for a player his age. The same man who had nearly walked away from international football at 29 was, a decade later, still dominating on football's biggest stage, because that 2021 Copa America victory had finally freed him from the psychological burden that had followed him his entire career. This is why the 2028 Copa America might end up being the single most important indicator of whether Messi actually makes it to the 2030 World Cup. Argentina's defeat to Spain in the 2026 final reintroduced a small amount of that old pressure, a reminder of how quickly the story can turn painful again. But if Argentina wins the 2028 Copa America, that pressure evaporates once more, just like it did in 2021. Think about what a win there would actually mean. It would make Argentina 3-time consecutive Copa America champions. It would be an extraordinary, sustained run of success. And coaches, generally speaking, do not blow up teams that keep winning. Scaloni would have almost no competitive reason to dismantle a squad that's still delivering trophies just 2 years out from a World Cup. Managers trust continuity when continuity is producing results, and there's no stronger evidence for continuity than back-to-back-to-back international titles. So the 2028 Copa America isn't just another trophy on the calendar, it's a psychological checkpoint. Win it, and the pressure that's been quietly building since the 2026 final disappears. The squad stays intact, and the road to a 7th World Cup remains wide open. Lose it, and the calculus gets a lot more complicated. Here's a reason that might surprise you, because it has nothing to do with Argentina at all. Inter Miami. One of the most underrated factors in footballer burnout isn't age by itself. It's the environment a player operates in day to day. Europe's elite clubs are relentless. 50 to 60 competitive matches a season. High-intensity fixtures every 3 or 4 days. Constant travel across multiple competitions. Year after year, that grind slowly wears down even the most gifted athletes, regardless of talent level. Messi experienced this firsthand during his 2 seasons at Paris Saint-Germain. By most accounts, the fit never quite clicked. The system didn't showcase him the way Barcelona once had. The environment never felt entirely comfortable. He played 75 matches across those 2 seasons, and by the time he left Paris, he looked less like a player enjoying his football and more like someone carrying pressure without the accompanying joy. Inter Miami has been almost the exact opposite experience. From the moment Messi arrived in Florida, David Beckham made the club's priorities unmistakably clear. The project would be built around Messi, not the other way around. Beckham has been vocal in describing Messi as the greatest footballer in history, and he's never hidden how central Messi's happiness and well-being are to the club's long-term plans. At Inter Miami, Messi isn't just another star name on the roster. He is, functionally, the entire organizing principle of the club. That distinction changes everything about how his season is managed. When the fixture list gets congested, Messi rests, even when that means disappointing thousands of ticket holders who bought seats specifically to watch him play. In most of Europe, resting a club's biggest asset draws intense criticism from fans and media alike. In Miami, it's treated as part of a deliberate long-term strategy, not a controversy. The league itself helps too. MLS is significantly less physically demanding than Europe's top competitions, lower overall intensity, a lighter cumulative workload across the season. By the time international breaks roll around, Messi typically arrives at Argentina's camp considerably fresher than he would after a full season grinding through La Liga, the Premier League, or League One. Put those pieces together and a clear pattern emerges. Messi isn't really using Inter Miami to extend his club career for its own sake. He's using it to preserve himself for Argentina, And that distinction matters enormously, because Argentina doesn't need Messi to survive 60 exhausting club fixtures every year. They need him healthy and sharp for a handful of specific windows. Every June, every Copa America, every World Cup. Inter Miami isn't just giving Messi somewhere pleasant to play out his career, giving him the ideal physical environment to keep showing up for his country. There's a moment that tells you almost everything you need to know about how this Argentina squad feels about Messi, and it happened in the build-up to the 2026 World Cup final. Christian Romero approached Messi before the match and asked him a simple but loaded question. If Argentina wins this final, does that mean you'll keep playing? Stop and think about what that question actually reveals. Days before the single biggest match of his career, what was weighing on Romero's mind wasn't just the outcome of the game. It was whether winning might be the thing that finally convinces Messi to walk away for good. That single exchange says something bigger than any statistic could. Argentina's players don't merely want to win football matches. They want to win them with Messi. That distinction is what separates this squad from almost every other national team on earth. Most players compete for their country out of patriotism and pride, and Argentina's do too. But there's an added layer here, a devotion to the man who single-handedly transformed the history and identity of their national team. Every sprint back to help defensively, every tracking run, every extra yard covered in midfield carries an unspoken second purpose beyond the scoreline. You could see that mentality on full display after the 2026 final. While Spanish players were celebrating their title, Leandro Paredes confronted them directly. Asked about it afterward, his explanation was simple. He wasn't willing to let anyone disrespect his country, or Messi. That's not just Paredes speaking for himself. That protective instinct runs through the entire squad. De Paul has effectively become an unofficial bodyguard for Messi on the pitch. Emiliano Martinez has spoken repeatedly about the depth of his admiration for him. Enzo Fernandez, Mac Allister, Lautaro Martinez, Romero, these aren't players who simply respect Messi as their captain. They're players who are genuinely inspired by him, and inspiration tends to produce a level of effort that raw professional obligation never quite matches. By 2030, Messi likely won't need to cover more ground than he does now. He won't need to chase down every loose ball or track every overlapping run, because there will be 10 teammates on the pitch willing to do that running for him. Not because a tactical instruction tells them to, but because they refuse to let his final chapter with the national team end in disappointment. That's not something you can measure with a stat sheet or a heat map. But as long as that feeling exists inside the Argentina dressing room, Messi will never be asked to carry the team by himself. The team will keep carrying him right back. So will Lionel Messi actually play at the 2030 World Cup? Nobody can say for certain. Football has a long history of humbling, confident predictions. Injuries happen without warning. Form fluctuates. Motivation can shift overnight for reasons entirely outside anyone's control. But when you lay every piece of this puzzle side by side, the overall picture becomes very difficult to dismiss as pure fantasy. A head coach who has restructured an entire national team system specifically to protect and empower him. A playing style built on intelligence and positioning rather than raw pace. One of the few skill sets in football that genuinely can improve with age instead of declining. A 2028 Copa America that could remove the last significant source of psychological pressure, the same way 2021 did. An Inter Miami setup deliberately engineered to preserve his body for international duty rather than exhaust it in club football. And a dressing room full of teammates who are, in their own words and their own actions, determined to run twice as hard just to keep him on the pitch a little longer. Then there's one more factor that shouldn't be overlooked: timing itself. The 2030 World Cup won't be an ordinary tournament. It marks a full century of World Cup history. A milestone the sport's global governing bodies and commercial partners will want to celebrate in a way that resonates far beyond the pitch. Messi has maintained a long-running partnership with Adidas, one of the largest and most recognizable brands in global sport. A tournament of that symbolic magnitude naturally carries enormous commercial weight, and having the defining player of his generation on football's biggest stage for that milestone would carry value not just for Argentina, but for the sport as a whole. To be clear, sponsorships and commercial interests won't be what decides whether Messi actually gets selected for a squad. That decision will come down to his body, his motivation, and his football, exactly as it should. But when the footballing reasons and the commercial incentives happen to point in the same direction, the overall possibility only becomes harder to dismiss. For years, the idea of Lionel Messi playing at a 2030 World Cup sounded like little more than a nostalgic fantasy, something fans wished for but never seriously expected. Today, when you actually examine the system built around him, the way his game has aged, the psychological arc of his career, the environment he now plays in, and the loyalty of the players around him, it starts to sound entirely plausible. And if, one day, on a pitch somewhere in Spain, Portugal, or Morocco, a 43-year-old Lionel Messi walks out wearing Argentina's number 10 one more time, maybe we shouldn't call it a miracle at all. Maybe, looking back at everything that had to align to make it possible, we should say we saw it coming all along.